My sister forced me to eat takeout in a hallway while they toasted my nephew's promotion in a private suite. They thought I was just an ATM. But when the $2,900 bill arrived, I delivered 4 words that turned their celebration into a nightmare. Before we continue today's story, we have an urgent announcement to make. Due to technical issues, we are pivoting towards another channel. Please subscribe to our new channel, Kin and Karma. You can find the link in the video description, the pinned comment, and the collaboration tag on this video. Make sure to switch over now so you don't miss out. Thank you for your support. Now back to the story. The migraine was a living thing, a dull, throbbing entity that had taken up residence behind my left eye 3 days ago and refused to sign a lease. I was lying in the dark, a cold compress pressed against my forehead, the silence of my apartment only broken by the hum of the air purifier. It had been a brutal quarter at the firm. As a senior strategy consultant, burnout wasn't a diagnosis, it was just Tuesday. I had spent the last 6 weeks living out of a suitcase, flying between New York and London, restructuring a failing tech giant that didn't want to be saved. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. The screen lit up the room with a harsh, artificial glare, stabbing at my eyes. I groaned, rolling over to check the caller ID. Carla, my sister. I debated letting it go to voicemail. I really did. My body felt heavy, anchored to the mattress by exhaustion and the lingering nausea of the migraine. But the guilt, that old, familiar reflex ingrained in me since childhood, kicked in. Carla only called when it was urgent or when she needed money, usually both. Hello. My voice was a rasp, dry and weak. Mia, finally. Carla's voice was high-pitched, frantic, and far too loud for my current state. I've been trying to reach you all afternoon. Did you forget? I sat up slowly, the room spinning slightly. Forget what, Carla? I've been sick. I just got back from London yesterday. Oh, stop being dramatic, she snapped, dismissing my health with the same casual indifference she'd shown for the last 40 years. It's Cameron's big night. The promotion, we're celebrating at Orangery tonight. You have to be there. He's been asking for you. Cameron, my nephew. The mention of his name softened the edge of my irritation. Cameron was the one bright spot in the otherwise murky dynamic of my family. I had practically raised him while Carla was finding herself in her 20s, and later, when she was busy managing her social calendar while I managed her bills. He got the senior analyst role. I asked, a genuine smile touching my lips for the first time in days. He actually got it. Of course he did, Carla scoffed. He's brilliant, takes after his mother. Look, the reservation is for 7:30. Henry is driving us, so just meet us there. And Mia, dress up. This is a high-end place. I don't want you showing up in one of your pantsuits. I know what Orangery is, Carla, I said, rubbing my temple. I'm the one who introduced you to the owner, remember? Whatever, just be there. Cameron will be devastated if his favorite aunt flakes on him. She hung up before I could answer. I stared at the phone, the silence rushing back in. My head pounded in rhythm with my heart. I should have said no. I should have told her I was physically incapable of putting on heels and making polite conversation. But the thought of Cameron looking for me, wanting to share his victory with me, overrode the pain. I dragged myself out of bed. I popped 2 extra-strength painkillers and moved to my closet. I chose a sleek silk navy dress, understated, expensive, professional. I applied my makeup carefully, hiding the dark circles, masking the pallor of sickness with blush. I looked in the mirror. I looked like Mia the success, Mia the provider, not Mia the tired, lonely sister who just wanted to sleep. I didn't know it then, staring at my reflection, but I was dressing for an execution. My own. The physical pain in my head was nothing compared to what was waiting for me at that restaurant. The betrayal that was coming wouldn't just hurt, it would dismantle my entire understanding of family. The taxi ride to Orangery was a blur of city lights and nausea. I focused on my breathing, clutching the small, velvet-wrapped box in my purse. Inside was a vintage Omega watch, something I had bought at an auction 6 months ago, saving it for this exact moment. It was a congratulations gift for Cameron, a symbol of his entry into the professional world. a world I knew intimately. When the taxi pulled up to the curb, the restaurant glowed like a beacon of exclusivity. It was the kind of place where the menu didn't have prices and the waiting list was measured in months. I knew it well. I had entertained clients here for a decade. The maitre d', Jean-Luc, knew my favorite wine, my preferred table, and my aversion to cilantro. I stepped out, the cool evening air providing a momentary relief. I walked up the steps, expecting to see Carla, Henry, and Cameron waiting in the foyer. They were already inside. I gave my name to the hostess, a young woman I didn't recognize. "Mia, I'm joining the reservation for Carla." "Ah, yes," she said, her smile tight, almost pitying. "They are already seated in the private gold room. Please follow me." We walked through the main dining room. I nodded to a few familiar faces, a hedge fund manager I'd consulted for, a tech CEO I knew from a board placement. This was my world. I felt a sense of pride that I could treat my family to this experience, even if I wasn't the one strictly hosting. The hostess led me to the back, towards the private suites. But instead of opening the heavy oak doors to the gold room, she stopped just outside it, in a small, alcove hallway adorned with a decorative bench and a large potted fern. The door to the gold room was slightly ajar. I could hear laughter, clinking glasses, Henry's booming, boisterous voice recounting a golf story. "Madam," the hostess said softly. I turned to her. "Yes, are we going in?" Before she could answer, the door swung open. Carla stepped out. She looked impeccable in a crimson dress I recognized. I had paid for it last Christmas. Her hair was perfectly coiffed, her jewelry glittering under the sconce lights. "Mia, you made it," she said, but she didn't move to hug me. She stood in the doorway, effectively blocking the entrance. "Happy for Cameron," I said, stepping forward. "Shall we?" Carla didn't move. She held up a hand, her manicured nails catching the light. "Actually, that's the thing. We had a bit of a mix-up with the seating." I frowned, the headache spiking again. "What do you mean? It's a private room, Carla. There are 12 seats in there. There are only 4 of us." "Well, yes," Carla said, her voice dropping to that patronizing tone she used when explaining simple concepts to what she considered simple people. "But we invited the Holdens. And the Millers. You know, people who can actually help Cameron with his networking. Important people." I blinked. The Holdens and the Millers were my neighbors. I had introduced them to Carla years ago. "Okay, so pull up another chair. It's a big table." Carla sighed, a dramatic exhalation of air that signaled I was being difficult. She reached behind her, into the room, and picked up something from a side table. It was a white styrofoam takeout box. She thrust it toward me. "Look, Mia, it's just crowded. And to be honest, the vibe is very young professional and high energy. You look exhausted, like you're contagious." She wrinkled her nose. "We didn't want you bringing the mood down." I stared at the box. I stared at her face. "Carla, you're joking." "I ordered you the sea bass," she said, forcing the box into my hands. "It's delicious. Honestly, you'll be more comfortable out here. It's quieter. You can rest that head of yours." My fingers curled around the warm plastic. I looked past her into the room. I saw Cameron, my nephew. He was laughing at something Mr. Holden was saying, a glass of champagne in his hand. He looked right at me. For a second, our eyes locked. I expected him to stand up. I expected him to say, "Mom, what are you doing? Let Aunt Mia in." Instead, he looked away. He took a sip of his champagne and turned his back to the door. The ice in my veins was colder than the winter wind outside. "There," Carla said, patting my arm with a fake sympathy that made my skin crawl. "We'll come say hi when dessert is served. Enjoy the fish. Oh, and Mia." She leaned in, her voice a whisper of pure venom. "Let us be honest. Seats at the big table are reserved for real family. The kind that shows up, not just the kind that sends checks." She closed the door. I was left standing in the hallway, alone, holding a box of lukewarm sea bass. The humiliation was a physical blow. It punched the air out of my lungs. I sank onto the decorative bench, the velvet seat hard and unforgiving. I should have left. Any self-respecting person would have thrown the box at the door and stormed out. But I didn't. I sat there. I opened the box. The smell of fish, usually appetizing, made my stomach turn. I took the plastic fork she had graciously included. I sat there because I was in shock. I sat there because my brain couldn't process the cruelty. But mostly, I sat there because a cold, hard clarity was beginning to cut through the migraine. Carla thought this was a power move. She thought she had put me in my place, the eccentric, spinster aunt who was useful for money but embarrassing in public. She thought she held all the cards because she was the mother and I was just the visitor. But she had forgotten one crucial thing. She had forgotten who signed the membership agreement for this club. She had forgotten that in the ecosystem of Elorangerie, she wasn't the predator. She was the plankton. As I sat on that bench, listening to the muffled roar of the celebration I was paying for but not attending, the memories flooded back. They weren't the warm, fuzzy nostalgia of a Hallmark movie. They were itemized receipts of my life. I remembered being 24, fresh out of business school, eating instant noodles for dinner so I could send Carla money for rent because her modeling career wasn't taking off. I remembered sitting in the loan officer's office, co-signing for Henry's third failed business venture, a artisanal dog treat bakery that went under in 4 months because Carla sobbed that the stress was going to kill him. And Cameron, my sweet, brilliant Cameron. I remembered the tuition checks for private school, the laptop for college, the summer internship I secured for him at my own firm, calling in favors I had saved for years, putting my own reputation on the line to vouch for him. I had built the foundation they were dancing on. The door to the private room opened again. I stiffened, expecting an apology or maybe an invite. It was Henry, my brother-in-law. He stumbled out, his face flushed with expensive scotch. He saw me sitting on the bench, the unopened takeout box on my lap. He didn't look ashamed. He looked amused. "Hey, Mia." He slurred, leaning against the wall for support. "Food good. The sea bass here is top tier, top tier." He was a soft man, Henry. Soft hands, soft spine, soft morals. He had never worked a hard day in his life, floating from one of my bailouts to the next, always with a smile and a vague promise of paying you back next time. "It's fine, Henry," I said, my voice steady, betraying none of the rage boiling beneath my skin. "Good, good," he nodded, adjusting his tie. "Hey, while I have you. Carla was saying, with the promotion and all, Cameron is going to need a bigger place, closer to the city. We saw this condo in Tribeca, loft style, very chic. We were thinking maybe as a signing bonus, from his favorite aunt." He winked. He actually winked. I looked at him, this man who was wearing a suit I knew for a fact I had bought for his birthday 3 years ago. He was asking me for $500,000 while I sat in the hallway like a servant. "Tribeca is expensive, Henry," I said flatly. "Investment, Mia. It's an investment." He waved a hand dismissively. "Anyway, think about it. Don't be a stranger out here." He chuckled at his own joke and slipped back into the room. The audacity was breathtaking. It was almost impressive in its absolute lack of self-awareness. I realized then that this wasn't just about tonight. This was the dynamic. This was the ecosystem they had thrived in. I was the resource. I was the mine they stripped for gold, and when I was empty or inconvenient, I was boarded up and left outside. Carla wasn't just my sister. She was a parasite in silk. Her profession was socialite, but her true job was managing me. She kept me close enough to extract value, but distant enough to maintain her superiority. She resented my success even as she devoured the fruits of it. She hated that I was the one with the power, so she exerted the only power she had, social exclusion, emotional manipulation. And Cameron. He was the product of their factory. He had learned well. I looked at the takeout box. I closed the lid. I stood up. My headache was gone. It had been replaced by a singular, crystalline focus. I picked up my purse. I walked down the hallway past the gold room. I didn't storm in. I didn't make a scene. I walked straight to the Mater D station. Jean-Luc was there, reviewing the evening's manifest. He looked up, his face lighting up with genuine warmth when he saw me. "Mademoiselle Mia. I did not know you were dining with us. The hostess said you were unavailable." He looked confused, glancing toward the hallway I had just emerged from. "There was a misunderstanding, Jean-Luc," I said, leaning against the podium. I smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. My family is in the gold room. They seem to be having a wonderful time. Indeed, Jean-Luc noted, lowering his voice. They have ordered quite aggressively. The vintage Krug, the Wagyu, the caviar service. Of course they have, I said softy. Shall I have them set a place for you? We can bring in an extra chair immediately. No, I said. I'm actually leaving. I'm not feeling well. Oh, I am so sorry. Shall I call your car? In a moment, I paused, looking Jean-Luc in the eye. Jean-Luc, you know how usually, when my sister dines here, you simply charge my card on file. The black Amex. But of course, mademoiselle, it is standing instruction. The family account. Yes, I said. I took a deep breath. About that. The conversation with Jean-Luc was swift, surgical, and silent. He was a professional. He understood discretion. He also understood the difference between a valued patron and a freeloader. I am canceling the standing instruction, Jean-Luc, I said, my voice low but firm. Effective immediately, for tonight and for all future visits. Jean-Luc blinked, his pen hovering over the ledger. Are you certain, mademoiselle? The bill, it is already substantial. I am certain, I replied. The card on file is not authorized for this table. Tonight they are paying for themselves. He looked at me, really looked at me for a long moment. He saw the fatigue in my eyes, the slight tremble in my hand that I was fighting to control. He nodded once, a sharp, decisive movement. Understood. I will remove the authorization. The bill will be presented to the table directly. Thank you, Jean-Luc. I turned to leave, but stopped. Actually, Jean-Luc, one more thing. Yes. Do you still have that table available? The one by the window in the main dining room? The one I usually prefer. A slow smile spread across his face. Table 4. It is always available for you, mademoiselle. Excellent, I said, handing him the takeout box Carla had shoved into my hands. Please dispose of this. I'll be dining in tonight. I didn't leave. I didn't go home to nurse my migraine. Instead, I walked back into the main dining room, head held high, and took my seat at the best table in the house. I ordered a glass of Sancerre and the lobster bisque. I sat there, in full view of the hallway leading to the private suites, and I waited. While I ate, I pulled out my phone. The headache was gone, replaced by a cold, calculating clarity. I opened my banking app. I opened my email. I began to dig. I had been so busy with work, so trusting a family, that I had let things slide. I had let Carla manage some of the shared family expenses. I had let Henry borrow the corporate card for emergencies. I scrolled through the statements. The emergency charges were staggering. A business trip to Miami that coincided perfectly with Art Basel. Office supplies that were clearly from a high-end electronics store. And then, the kicker. A recurring monthly transfer from my account to a consulting LLC I didn't recognize. I did a quick search on the LLC name. It was registered to a residential address, Carla's address. They weren't just using me for dinners. They were embezzling from me. My blood ran cold. This wasn't just ungrateful family behavior, this was theft. Systematic, deliberate theft. I texted my lawyer, Sarah. It was late, but she was always up. Me, need an audit on the family trust and the joint account with Carla. Immediately. Suspect unauthorized withdrawals. Sarah, on it. Everything okay? Me, no, but it's about to be interesting. I sipped my wine, watching the door to the gold room. I saw waiters going in and out, carrying trays of decadent food. I saw the sommelier bring another bottle of vintage champagne. They were feasting like kings, oblivious to the sword hanging over their heads. I realized then that I had been blind. I had thought my generosity bought loyalty. I thought my success lifted them up. But all it had done was enable their entitlement and fuel their resentment. They didn't love me. They loved my wallet. And tonight, the wallet was closed. An hour later, the door to the gold room swung open. The party was moving. Carla led the way, laughing loudly, her arm linked with Mrs. Holden. Henry followed, looking flushed and boisterous, slapping Mr. Miller on the back. Cameron was in the middle, looking every bit the successful young professional, basking in the attention. They were heading for the exit. They hadn't even looked for me. They assumed I had eaten my cold fish in the hallway and slunk home like a good little doormat. but their path to the door took them right past my table. I didn't look up. I continued to enjoy my espresso, scrolling through my phone. It was Cameron who saw me first. He stopped dead in his tracks. Aunt Mia. The group halted. Carla turned, her eyes widening in surprise. For a second, she looked confused. Then her expression hardened into annoyance. "Mia, what are you doing here?" She hissed, stepping away from the Holdens to confront me. "I thought you left. You said you were sick." "I felt better," I said calmly, setting down my cup. "The bisque here is excellent, much better than lukewarm sea bass in a hallway." The Holdens and the Millers looked uncomfortable. They sensed the tension, the undercurrent of hostility that Carla was trying desperately to mask with a tight smile. "Well," Carla said, her voice strained, "we're just heading out. Wonderful night. Cameron is so happy. We missed you in there, really." "Did you?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. "Because I was right here, you could have waved." "Don't be like that," Henry interjected, his voice slurring slightly. "Come on, Mia, don't make a scene. It's Cameron's night." "I'm not making a scene, Henry," I said. "I'm just finishing my dinner. Unlike some people, I pay for my meals." Carla's eyes narrowed. "What is that supposed to mean? We're family, we share." "Do we?" I asked. "Because earlier you told me seats at the big table are reserved for real family, the kind that shows up. Well, I showed up, Carla, and I was shown the door." "That was a joke." She laughed, a shrill, nervous sound. "Oh, Mia, you have no sense of humor. You're always so serious. That's why you're alone." The insult hung in the air, sharp and cruel. The Holdens looked at their shoes. "Maybe," I said softly. "Or maybe I'm alone because I've spent my life surrounded by people who only see me as a bank account." "You're drunk," Carla snapped. "Henry, get the car, we're leaving." She turned to go, dismissing me as she always did. But before she could take a step, Jean-Luc appeared. He wasn't alone. He had two other waiters with him, and he held a leather folio in his hand. He stepped directly into their path. "Excuse me, madame," Jean-Luc said, his voice polite but firm. "There is the matter of the bill." Carla waved a hand dismissively. "Just put it on the usual account. My sister's account, she's right there." She pointed at me. Jean-Luc didn't look at me. He looked straight at Carla. "I am afraid that is not possible, madame. The account holder has specifically declined authorization for this party." The silence that followed was absolute. The background noise of the restaurant seemed to vanish. Carla froze. Her hand dropped to her side. She looked at Jean-Luc, then slowly, terrifyingly, she turned to look at me. "What?" she whispered. "You heard him," I said, taking a sip of water. "I declined authorization." You can't do that," she stammered. Her face was losing color rapidly. "It's our account, the family account." "It's my account, Carla," I corrected. "My name, my credit, my money, you just have a card I let you use, past tense." "But the bill," she choked out, it's a lot." "I imagine it is," I said. "Vintage Krug isn't cheap, and 12 people, that adds up." Henry stepped forward, his face turning from flushed to pale. "Mia, come on, this isn't funny, just tell him it's fine. I didn't bring my wallet." "Neither did I," Carla said, panic rising in her voice. "Mia, stop this. You're embarrassing us in front of the Holdens." "I'm not doing anything," I said, leaning back in my chair. "I'm just a stranger, remember, someone you didn't have room for, and as a general rule, I don't pay for strangers." The facade cracked. It wasn't a hairline fracture, it was a complete structural failure. Carla lunged toward my table, her hands slamming onto the white tablecloth. The silverware rattled. "You spiteful, jealous B***." She hissed, her voice low and venomous. "You're doing this on purpose. You're trying to ruin Cameron's night because you're miserable." "I'm not the one who ordered 3 bottles of Crystal on a card that wasn't mine," I retorted, not flinching. "You have to pay it." She screeched, no longer caring about the onlookers. "We don't have that kind of money, you know we do." "Then why did you order it?" I asked simply. "Because you always pay." She screamed. "That's your job, that's all you're good for. You don't have kids, you don't have a husband, you just have money. What else are you going to do with it?" The words hung there, ugly and naked. She had said the quiet part out loud. She had confirmed everything I had suspected, everything I had feared. To her, I wasn't a sister. I was a utility. Behind her, I saw Cameron. He looked horrified. He was staring at his mother as if seeing her for the first time. The mask of the doting, successful matriarch had slipped, revealing the grasping, desperate woman underneath. "Mom," Cameron said, his voice quiet. "Stop." "Shut up, Cameron," she snapped, whipping around. "She's trying to humiliate us. She's trying to destroy your future." "No, Carla," I said, standing up. "I'm trying to save mine." I pulled out my phone. "And while we're discussing finances," I said, my voice projecting clearly to the group, "let's talk about the consulting LLC you set up, Carla. The one that's been billing my account for $5,000 a month for the last 2 years." Carla went white. Even her lips lost their color. She looked like she was about to faint. I don't know what you're talking about," she stammered. "I think you do," I said. "I think you and Henry have been siphoning money from me to fund your lifestyle, the trips, the clothes, this charade." I gestured to the restaurant. Henry looked like he was going to be sick. He started backing away, mumbling something about needing air. "That's embezzlement, Carla," I said. "That's fraud, and I have the bank statements right here." I held up my phone, displaying the transaction history I had pulled up earlier. The Holdens and the Millers were exchanging horrified glances. They began to shuffle away, murmuring excuses about early mornings and babysitters. They didn't want to be anywhere near the blast radius of this explosion. "Wait!" Carla cried, reaching out to Mrs. Holden. "Don't go, it's a misunderstanding. She's off her meds. She's having a breakdown." Mrs. Holden gently but firmly removed Carla's hand from her arm. "It was a lovely dinner, Carla. Thank you. Well, we'll see you around." They fled, the audience was gone, it was just us. And the bill? Jean-Luc cleared his throat. "Madame," he said to Carla, extending the leather folio again. "The total is $2,940. We accept all major credit cards, or perhaps cash." Carla stared at the bill. She looked at Henry, who was studying the floor tiles with intense fascination. She looked at Cameron, who was watching me with a mix of shock and something else, respect. Fear. "I can't pay this," Carla whispered, tears streaming down her face, angry, frustrated tears. "Mia, please, I'm begging you, don't do this to me. Not here, not now." "I'm not doing anything to you, Carla," I said. "You did this to yourself. You ordered the feast. Now you have to digest the bill." I looked at Cameron. "Cameron," I said, "you're a senior analyst now. You make a good salary. Perhaps you should step up." Cameron looked at the bill. He looked at his mother, sobbing and defeated. He looked at his father, a coward in a tailored suit. He reached into his pocket. He pulled out his wallet. "I'll pay it," he said quietly. "Cameron, no," Carla gasped. "That's your bonus. That's for the apartment." "There is no apartment, Mom," Cameron said, his voice hard. "There never was there." He looked at me. "I'm sorry, Aunt Mia. I didn't know about the LLC. I didn't know about any of it." "I know," I said softly, "but you knew I was in the hallway, and you didn't come out." He flinched. Shame washed over his face. He nodded slowly. "Yeah, I did know that. I'm sorry." He handed his card to Jean-Luc. It was a debit card. I knew how much was on it. It was his savings. Everything he had worked for. Jean-Luc took the card. He looked at me. I gave him a tiny, imperceptible nod. He ran the card. The machine word, approved. Cameron took the receipt. He didn't look at his parents. He walked over to me. "Happy promotion," I said, handing him the velvet box from my purse. "I got this for you, before all this." He took the box. He opened it. The vintage Omega gleamed under the restaurant lights. "Aunt Mia, I can't accept this." "Take it," I said. "Consider it a reminder. Time is precious, Cameron. Don't waste it on people who don't value you, even if they're family." I turned to Carla and Henry. They were broken, exposed. The entitlement had been stripped away, leaving only the ugly truth of their greed. "My lawyer will be in touch about the LLC," I said. "I suggest you find your own. You're going to need one." I signaled to Jean-Luc. "My car, please." "Right away, mademoiselle." I walked out of Ellorangery into the cool night air. I was alone. But for the first time in years, I didn't feel lonely. I felt free. The fallout was immediate, brutal, and spectacularly public. I didn't just walk out of Ellorangery, I walked out of their lives, but I left a trail of paperwork behind me. The next morning, Sarah had the forensic accountant, a man named Gupta with eyes like lasers, dissecting every transaction Carla and Henry had ever made with my money. It wasn't just the $5,000 monthly stipend for the fake consultancy. It was worse. There were withdrawals from a joint account I had set up for emergencies. Carla had claimed it was for medical bills for a non-existent condition. There were credit card charges for luxury vacations they had sworn were business trips. There were even transfers from a college fund I had started for Cameron, drained to pay off Henry's gambling debts. The total came to nearly $250,000 over 5 years. I sat in Sarah's office, staring at the spreadsheet. The numbers were black and white, but they felt like bruises. "We have enough for a criminal indictment," Sarah said, her voice grim. "Fraud, embezzlement, grand larceny. We can go to the police today." I looked out the window at the city skyline. I thought about Cameron. I thought about the boy I had held when he was born, the young man whose hand had shaken as he paid that dinner bill. "Not yet," I said. "First, we have a family meeting." I called it for Sunday brunch. Neutral ground, a quiet bistro uptown. I invited Carla, Henry, and Cameron. I told them it was about reconciliation. They arrived looking wary but hopeful. Carla had clearly spent hours on her appearance, trying to project an air of injured dignity. Henry looked hungover. Cameron looked tired, the weight of the world on his shoulders. I waited until the coffee was served. Then I placed a thick manila envelope on the table. "This," I said, tapping the envelope, "is the audit report from my forensic accountant." Carla's hand froze halfway to her water glass. Henry choked on his croissant. "It details every single unauthorized withdrawal, transfer, and credit card charge you two have made in the last 5 years." I continued, my voice steady. "The total is $248,000. Silence, thick, suffocating silence. "Mia," Carla whispered, her face pale, we can explain. It was investments, loans, we were going to pay you back." "Stop," I said, "just stop. There are no investments, there is no consultancy, there is only theft." I looked at Cameron. He was staring at the envelope, his jaw tight. "Did you know about the college fund, Cameron?" I asked softly. He looked up, his eyes wide. "What?" "The fund I started for you when you were 10. It had $50,000 in it. It's gone." Carla let out a small, strangled sob. "We had to. Henry, he was in trouble. We didn't want you to worry." "So you stole from your son?" I asked. Cameron stood up. His chair scraped loudly against the floor. He looked at his parents with a mixture of horror and disgust that I will never forget. "Is that true?" he demanded. "You took my college money." Henry stared at his plate. Carla covered her face with her hands. "Answer me," Cameron shouted, slamming his hand on the table. "Yes," Carla wailed, "but we did it for the family. We did it so we could keep the house, so we could give you everything." "You didn't give me anything," Cameron yelled. "Aunt Mia did. She paid for school. She got me the internship. She bought me the watch. What did you give me? Debts, lies." He turned to me. "Aunt Mia, I didn't know, I swear." "I know," I said. "Sit down, Cameron." He sank back into his chair, shaking. I turned back to Carla and Henry. "Here are your options. Option A, I go to the police. You will be arrested. You will be charged with grand larceny. You will likely go to prison." Carla began to hyperventilate. Henry looked like he was going to vomit. "Option B," I continued. "You sign a confession. You agree to a repayment plan, every cent plus interest. I will garnish your wages. I will put a lien on your house. You will live on a strict budget until I am repaid in full. And you will have zero access to Cameron's finances or mine, ever again." I pushed the document across the table. "Choose." They signed. They didn't even read it. They just signed, their hands trembling, tears streaming down Carla's face. It was the end of their reign, the end of the illusion. The aftermath was quiet but profound. Carla and Henry sold the big house in the suburbs and moved into a small apartment. They both got jobs, real jobs. Carla as a receptionist, Henry in sales. It was a humiliating step down for them, but it was honest work. The checks started arriving in my account every month. Small, consistent payments. It would take them decades to pay me back, but that wasn't the point. The point was accountability. I didn't see much of them after that. The holidays were awkward, brief affairs. The warmth was gone, replaced by a polite, distant civility. But the toxicity was gone too. Cameron was a different story. He moved into a small studio in the city, refusing to take any more money from me or his parents until he had built his own savings back up. We met for dinner every Tuesday. Real dinners. Not at El Orangery, but at quiet little places where we could talk. He wore the Omega watch every day. He told me he looked at it whenever he felt unsure, whenever he felt pressure to be something he was. It reminded him of the night he stood up. The night he chose integrity over entitlement. One evening, about 6 months later, we were sitting in a park, watching the sunset. "You know," Cameron said, turning the watch on his wrist, "I used to be so jealous of you. Mom always said you were lucky, that everything just happened for you." I laughed, a genuine hearty laugh. Lucky. Cameron, I worked 80-hour weeks for 20 years. I missed weddings. I missed birthdays. I built my life brick by brick. "I know that now," he said. "I see how hard you work, and I see how empty they are." He paused. "Thank you, Aunt Mia, for everything, for the school, for the job, but mostly for forcing the truth, even if it hurt." "Truth usually does," I said, "but it heals cleaner than a lie." He smiled. "You were right, about the seats." "What seats?" "At the table, you said you don't pay for strangers, but you do pay for family, real family." He reached into his bag and pulled out a small box. Inside was a simple silver bracelet, not expensive but tasteful. "I got my first bonus," he said. "The real one. I wanted you to have this." I took the bracelet, I put it on. It felt heavier than the Rolex I usually wore. It felt like love. "It's beautiful, Cameron," I whispered, blinking back tears. "It's for the woman who taught me what worth actually means," he said. We sat there as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and violet. I had lost a sister in a way. I had lost the illusion of a happy, perfect family, but I had gained something far more valuable. I had gained respect. I had gained peace, and I had gained a nephew who finally saw me, not as a resource, not as an ATM, but as a person, as family. And that, I realized, was worth every penny.